All right, good morning. There's only a few things I want to elaborate on in Chapter 2. What you're going to see on the screen is basically the PowerPoint of the entire chapter. So feel free to use that as a framework for your notes if you're taking notes on what you're reading, which again, to remind you, research says that's one of the best ways you can retain your information. So remember that the chapter itself is divided into 5 main components. And they are the development of the web, that the web goes social, convergence, and that has to do with mobile media, economics, and democracy. So a lot of information in there. I've already given you an overview of the chapter content itself in the Prezi, and there's just a couple of things I wanted to elaborate on here. Shouldn't take me, honestly, more than a few minutes. So again, to begin with, your book goes into that history. We've already talked about that a little bit. In terms of more current trends that are sort of, in the last couple of years since the textbook has been published, and remember there's already been a 2013 update, or rather 15 update, is probably the use and the implementation of cloud storage. Fairly common. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Google Docs, and it's very convenient. It's something I've begun to do. And just makes things so much easier. I don't have to walk around with the thumb drive or flash drive, and so that's fairly common. Another big influence on the development and the perpetuation of the internet is the heavily involvement and use by teenagers. And I'm sure that you yourself can attest, whether you're already, in your 20s and you've got younger siblings and you're, amazed at what they do online, and not even sure that you quite were as savvy as the age they are. I certainly know that's the case around our house. So that's a big deal. The other thing is this notion of there are certain myths about search engines, and there are fundamentally 4 different myths. One is that a search engine is impartial, that it simply objectively gives you all of the websites that have the search terms that you utilized in your search, and that is not true at all, at all. And there are many biases inherent within that. And every search engine can have a different bias, and sometimes it's based on, can be based on a number of different factors, but certainly the idea that a search engine is objective or impartial is absolutely not true. A second common myth is that that they search the entire web, they search everything that's out there and give you a pool, and they do not. It's a small section. And that they're the only options to find information. That's not true. You can certainly use other things in order to find information on the web. You do not have to launch or begin with Google or Yahoo, or honestly nowadays Google is so common, it's a verb. I'll just Google it, and then we have the notion of social media, and one of the biggest things here that's not really discussed in the book, I mentioned it in the Prezi, is the use of the massively multiplayer online programs that they call them orgs. So that's a big one. Conversion, third subject in your chapter. And don't have a whole lot of new things I want to add here. It's pretty much, I think the textbook does a solid job. I do think it's very interesting to note how common the proliferation of smartphones is and how often we use them. And so mobile media has become one of the forefront, in terms of the influences. Economics, this is a big one. And probably the most significant area within this is this notion of security, and that can cover anything from identity theft and fraud, and you hear about that on the radio. Even just yesterday I heard of another company, and their data had been breached and people had access, and so who knows. So it's happening all the time. Many new companies have erupted and emerged as being sort of protectors of your online identity, and fraud protectors and so on and so forth. So it's created a whole new industry that didn't exist 10 years ago. Didn't exist 5 years ago, at least not the way it does today. So security is one of the most significant issues something to be very savvy about as you use things online, both to control your own protection as well as economics, the money issue. And then the chapter closes with the section on democracy. This idea of internet and democracy is really its own heading. And I allude to the Middle East and the conflicts that are going on now. More recently, you can look at the Ukraine. People have videos of everything. As I'm speaking, as I'm recording this, there's that whole debacle going on in Ferguson with the shooting. And so much of what's going on in mobile media and the ability and the instant access to information has changed the way that justice is pursued and sought. So it's definitely creating a shift in our modern day democracy, and we'll explore more of that concept as the course progresses. So not a lot of new things to add, just a couple things to emphasize in this particular chapter, and I think that you will find many of the links that I send you to, many of the places I want you to go explore, to be useful to you, and I hope that they are tools that you are able to incorporate. So that's it for now. I will see you online.